Aimed up YouTube and welcome back to a new video with Rams Fan YT. Today's video we'll be going over my predictions for this week's footballing action. We have got some local derbies, we've got some European playoff football to predict, and we've also got an unstable connection. So I apologise for any lag in advance. But we're going to start off with tonight's couple of championship games, starting off with Bristol City versus Wrexham. Two teams in a fine fight, it seems, to take the final championship playoff place. Wrexham in 8th, Bristol City in 9th. Wrexham 1 point off the playoffs, Bristol City 2 points off. So I would imagine a draw for a Derby fan, as obviously I'm a Derby fan, so a bit of biased perspective, would probably be the best outcome in this situation. However, I imagine at Ashton Gate, maybe a narrow 1-0 win for the Robins will be the actual result. Charlton Athletic versus Portsmouth. Yeah, Portsmouth in 21st, Charlton in 18th. Much more needed 3 points, I would suppose, for Portsmouth in this situation, who are only a point above a relegation zone, dangling ever so precariously. But I do suspect it will be a close 0-0 draw in this game. I think once Charlton get a point, that's probably enough to see them stay up, I would imagine, but maybe going towards more 45 points is probably what's needed to fully stay up. But I would suspect at this proceedings, they'd be pretty much home and dry with that point. Barnsley versus Peterborough United. Barnsley in 16th, Peterborough in 10th. Very much a mid-table battle, although I would suggest that Peterborough, if they manage to get a good run of form, could be surprise candidates for the playoffs, but I don't ultimately think that will be the case. I think at Oakwell, it will be a 1-1 draw. Bradford City versus Stockport County, 5th versus 4th. This is potentially, and I would probably say quite likely, to be a playoff semi-final fixture come the end of the season. Stockport in the much better of the two teams, but form-wise. But in terms of difference, actually in points total, only a point. And therefore, I think it's going to be a point in this one. A 0-0 draw at Valley Parade. Burton Albion versus Rotherham United. Burton need to win the game, as do Rotherham. It is a relegation 6-pointer. Burton are 1 point of safety. Rotherham are 2. Burton have had a few tough, very important games recently and have not won any of them. And maybe this, they performed admirably against West Ham. And if they can raise their game in this one, I certainly suspect they could win it and go 4-2 at the Pirelli Stadium to the Brewers. They'll probably just nick survival on the last day or something, as they always seem to do. Cardiff City versus AFC Wimbledon. I imagine most people will be like, yes, run of a win, routine win of Cardiff City. Not me, partly because I think I'm mental at these predictions. But I've just got this strange feeling that AFC Wimbledon are going to be one of the surprise defeating the giant David versus Goliath situation. 5-1 to AFC Wimbledon, which does seem absolutely ridiculous. But maybe it'll happen. Doncaster Rovers versus Huddersfield Town. Another bit of a mental one in this one. It would be, it's a Yorkshire derby, so the form of goes a bit out the window, but Huddersfield in 6th, just about in the playoffs by 3 points. Doncaster just outside the relegation zone by a singular point. But I think maybe at home, Doncaster could win this. Local pride on stake and all. 2-1 to Doncaster Rovers in this Yorkshire derby. Exeter City versus Wycombe Wanderers. 14th place Exeter versus 11th place Wycombe. 4 points is what separates these two teams. A very run-of-the-mill mid-table clash, I would suggest. And maybe at home, Exeter come out with a dominant display at St James's Park. 4-0 to the Gretchens is what I've gone with. Leyton Orient versus Plymouth Argyle. Plymouth Argyle in mid-table in 12th. Very bang average season, to be honest, for the Devon side. Leyton Orient, well, they're down in 18th. Probably a bit of an underwhelming season for Orient, and it's going to be a tough game against Plymouth. And I think Plymouth might come away with a 1-0 win in this one. Lincoln City versus Northampton Town. I think Lincoln have definitely been a surprise package for many this season. 4 points off the title, 4 points clear of third place Bolton, who they drew with against at the weekend. Certainly doing a sterling job at the moment. And up against Northampton Town, I can't see anything but a Lincoln win. They've been winning left, right and centre this season. 2-1 to the Imps at Sincil Stevenage versus Port Vale. Ninth place Stevenage are hosting bottom of the league Port Vale. The Valiants, well, I think they gave a valiant effort, but I think relegation is destined at this point. They're bottom of the league by 9 points to their nearest side above them. But maybe they scrap out a 1-1 draw in this one. They have improved a bit of late, which is something to take a note of, I suppose. Blackpool versus Mansfield Town. Obviously, Mansfield Town with their FA Cup exploit giant killing off Burnley in their opposition on the weekend. A very good job to Nigel Clough's men, I must say. They have now got to face League One action as they take on Blackpool, former FA Cup winners themselves, of course, Blackpool. I reckon this will be an end-to-end. There's 4 draws in the last 5 games for Mansfield, and maybe another draw in this one. I've gone with a 3-3 draw. Reading versus Bolton Wanderers. Reading are doing all right. Bolton are doing impeccably well at the moment, but that gap seems insurmountable at the moment to get into that top 2, so may have to settle for playoffs. And I think Reading may, with their game in hand, look to cause a bit of a question marks to emerge. And I think Reading, if they can win this one, certainly throw themselves right into that conversation, don't they? 1-0 Adam Majewski to Reading, therefore. I just think they've done very well, all things considering what has happened off the pitch over the course of the last few seasons with Reading. Barnet versus Swindon Town. It was a disappointing defeat for Swindon at the weekend. And they're going to look to right the wrongs in this one so they can stay in the top 3, because between them and Notts County, well, it's only goal scores which is keeping them in that top 3 position. They're travelling to the Hive in Barnet, who are equally on some very good form at the moment. They've sort of come out of nowhere now, 3 points off the playoffs. And you do say, well, it could potentially happen. I'm not quite convinced myself, but you do obviously get them question marks emerging about could it be. But I'm going to go 2-1 to Swindon Town in this one. They've done a great job. They may have to end up settling for playoffs because I still think MK Dons sneak that 3rd place. But very good season from Swindon by all accounts. Barrow versus Harrogate Town. Harrogate in relegation zone by 4 points. They need to win this one against 20th place Barrow, who got rid of Paul Gallagher, who lasted all but, 6 weeks, or was it 6 games rather, at the club. Wasn't an inspired choice. I was question marking him his entire time. And they've now appointed Dino Mamria, the ex-manager of Burton Albion, notably that I can remember. He does a very good job at steering teams clear of relegation. But can he get something up against Harrogate? I don't know. I think Simon Weaver's men might be able to get a win here. They've picked up 4 points in the last 2 games, and I'm going to carry that on with a 2-0 win for Harrogate. Bromley versus Cheltenham Town. Cheltenham are still not doing well. No win now in the last 5 games, and they could definitely get dragged back into the relegation battle. Don't get me wrong. Especially with a difficult game up against Cambridge, who are 2nd place in the league, doing quite a strong job at the moment. I suspect, not Cambridge, Bromley, who are top of the league, who are equally doing a strong job. And they are impeccable, really. They're hard to fault them at the moment. So I'm going 3-0 to Bromley, the Ravens at home. That would be a turn up for the Bucks, wouldn't it, if they win the league? I don't know if anyone has necessarily been suspecting that to happen this season. On to Cambridge now, and they're up against Colchester United. And yes, they have done a good job so far, Cambridge. But, you know, Colchester, you can never quite rule them out. They're sort of one of the ones that they're 5 points off the playoffs right now. They go on a crazy run, they could do it. And I've been saying that for like a couple of seasons, it feels, with Colchester. But I'm going to go with them to have a 2-1 win away from home at the Abbey Stadium. And there's been unveiled news this week that Cambridge have submitted planning applications for a new, larger stadium. We've seen that happen before. Didn't end the greatest. Chesterfield versus Gillingham. I think I said 2-1 Colchester, by the way, for that. Chesterfield versus Gillingham. Chesterfield just outside of the playoffs by a singular point. Spy rates are so hard to predict. There's such a... You don't know which team is going to turn up. They've had 13 draws, which is the most in the league. And Gillingham's pretty high there with 11 as well. So maybe a draw in this one. A 1-1 draw at the SMH Group Stadium. I think is now what Chesterfield's stadium is called. They've had all sorts of names over the years since moving from Saltergate. Crewe Alexandra versus Fleetwood Town. Crewe have managed to push themselves into the playoffs in that 7th place, which is a darn good performance from them in the last few weeks. Really come out of nowhere. And Fleetwood, well, they're just sort of fleeting around that mid-table bit of it. It's hard to see which way they're really going to be going this season. Mid-table mediocrity, it seems to be the case. And I'm actually weirdly going to go with a 4-1 win for Fleetwood Town. Can't quite rationalise that, but I'm seeing this as happening. MK Dons versus Crawley Town. Despite how good MK Dons are at the moment, and Crawley losing 3 in a row, I've got another weird premonition in League 2 tonight. Of a 5-1 win to Crawley. I don't know what it is that is making me say these mental results. Maybe it's something that I had last night in my food. I don't know, but we've gone some couple of mental ones already. Oldham Athletic versus Bristol Rovers. Oldham in 16th, not won now in 4 games. Not ideal for Oldham, but they are up against a Bristol Rovers team which are well in the thick of a relegation battle. 5 points clear of relegation zone, but in 21st place. Not the season, I think, that Bristol Rovers fans were hoping for this time round. And there's all sorts of finger pointing at going around. Steve Evans has got a huge job to turn it around, and I think he's not going to be able to do this one in this game. I think Oldham win 2-1, back to winning ways for the can't remember. We call the Latics as well. Oldham Athletic, the Greater Manchester side. Salford City versus Newport County. Newport are bottom of the league by a point. Both Harrogate and Newport are probably going to be relegated this season. It just depends really which one finishes slightly higher up. I don't know, but it's going to be a difficult game for them up against Salford, who are in the playoffs. The thing that they could probably help a lot is that Salford do not score a lot of goals, relatively speaking. And I think maybe as a result, Newport could maybe force a draw. I've gone with a 1-1 draw in this one at the Peninsula Stadium. Shrewsbury Town versus Notts County. Notts County are the most informed team alongside MK Dons at the moment, and they're in 4th place. Notts County, a very strong performance. They did drop points in the last one, getting a draw, but that does happen every now and again. Shrewsbury have seemed to have cleared for now a bit of space between them and the relegation zone. They are now a grand total of 7 points clear, having had back-to-back wins. And I think maybe they'll rescue a point in this one. I've gone with a 3-3 draw. Shrewsbury, after all, are at home, which does play an impact. Tranmere Rovers versus Accrington Stanley. 17th place Tranmere versus 13th place Accrington Stanley. Accrington have managed to push themselves up the table in the past few weeks with 3 wins in the last 4 games. Decent run of form, relatively speaking. Well, before the win on the last weekend for Tranmere, they had lost 5 in a row. It wasn't looking bright, and I think maybe Accrington gets another win here. 1-0 to Accrington Stanley. SE Halifax Town versus Gateshead in the National League. Gateshead are losing every week. You're nothing special. We lose every week. Well, Halifax are in 7th. They're in the playoffs, but I don't think it's commanding by any stretch. I think it's more Southend doing than anything over the past few weeks than Halifax. Considering the amount of goals scored between the two of them is astronomical. And it may even come down to goal difference coming into the season. I think at the Shea, Halifax may drop some points, and I've gone with a 1-1 draw, which I think would be the first point Gates have had in a very, very long time. Difficult, really, to see them getting many more points between now and the end of the season, really. Rochdale versus Scunthorpe United. Scunthorpe in 5th, Rochdale in 2nd. 2 games in hand over top of the league and equal on points. You would very much see that. I think that title race is going to go right down for a while. I still think York City might win it, but Rochdale are going to push them all the way. And I think they maybe drop a couple of points here. Scunthorpe are a difficult team to come up against, even though they lost the last couple. They've been up against some difficult oppositions as well. It doesn't get any easier for Scunthorpe, but I think they're going to force a 0-0 draw in this one. Sutton United versus Woking, a bit of a local derby here in the southeast of England. Woking bang in mid-table in 12th. Couldn't really be much more mid-table if you tried, could you? But you never know, they may be pushing a bit up the table, but I mean, they'll probably be happy with another mid-table finish. They're sort of grown accustomed to that. And obviously, Sutton United in relegation zone at 1 point off safety. It's a difficult game, this one, and as all local derbies seem to end, I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw here. I can't pick a winner. I would suggest that Sutton probably stay up at the expense of Braintree at the moment. Maybe because Sutton were not that long ago in the Football League, and that's clouded my judgment. Wealdstone versus Hartlepool United. Well, what happened, Hartlepool? No wins now in the last 4, and that playoffs are seeming to fall away a bit, and it's against a mid-table side in Wealdstone who aren't doing great, to be honest. Only 1 win in the last 6 games. But I think maybe a draw in this one. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw in this game. Yeovil Town versus Aldershot Town. Yeovil in 17th, Aldershot in 19th. Aldershot in quite some fine form, really. 1 defeat in the last 6, 4 games unbeaten now. Looking very good for their money. Yeovil are now only 6 points away from relegation zone. There is a possibility that they don't see it coming and end up falling through that trapdoor. They do need to be careful, the Glovers. But maybe the Hewish, they'll get a point here. I've gone with a 1-1 draw in this game. It's an important game, relatively speaking. Just a must not lose, I think, for both teams. AFC Telford United versus Chorley. Telford fell out of the playoffs in the last game week. I mean, they still won in their last game, and there's 5 wins in the last 6. Paints a very positive picture, doesn't it? And I do strongly suspect that they get playoffs coming into the season, considering how good they have been at the moment. And they're up against an indifferent Chorley team. You don't quite know which one's turning up. And therefore, I think Telford will sneak a 1-0 win at home at the New Bucks. Hereford versus Darlington. Is this Hereford's first game that they're playing? They're temporarily playing at Sixway Stadium, home formerly to Worcester Warriors rugby team, and currently home to Worcester City. It's an all-weather pitch is a reason for that. And it's got over 12,000 seats. It's larger than Bournemouth, a Premier League side's stadium, which says quite a lot as well in that regard. They've also decided to make the managerial switch. They got rid of Paul Credis, who has been their manager for what feels like an absolute age, and they appointed Aaron Downs in his place. That will be interesting to see. He's only ever been first-team manager on a caretaker basis in a couple of spells, one of which, though, did see him manage to rescue Torquay United from relegation from the 6th tier. So he'll be looking to do the same again at Hereford. But he's been given until the end of the season to try and turn this team around. Not quite convinced it will happen up against Darlington, and it won't be an overnight job. 1 point from the playoffs at Darlington, 5 games unbeaten. I think you've got to suggest that the Quakers get a win here. 2-0 to Darlow. I've written down Leamington versus Leamington. That is not overly helpful. I don't think Leamington are playing themselves. That would be an odd case of affairs, wouldn't it? Who are Leamington playing? Spennymoor Town. There you go. Don't know why I put that down, but I actually think, Leamington, they're in a position where they know they're now relegated, pretty much. It's not mathematical, but it's pretty much darn certain, I would suggest. And I think now they can just play a bit with that freedom, knowing that they're going to be relegated coming in the season. You have a bit of that liberation. And let's face it, Spennymoor have had a lot of games called off or haven't managed to necessarily get as many wins as they have wanted to over the last few weeks. And I think Leamington can maybe exploit that. It's a long way from Spennymoor to Leamington as well. So I've gone 3-1 to Leamington. We'll give Spennymoor a goal. Southport versus Buxton. Buxton have become a very mid-table team, I'm afraid to say. Since I bigged them up for potentially being in the playoffs, they have fallen off a bit. I still reckon they'll be decent coming into the season, but you know what? I think Southport do force a win in this game. I've gone with a competitive 3-2 win for the home side. AFC Totton versus Hampton and Richmond Borough. Hampton Richmond Borough, they were, before their last game, 4 games unbeaten. And if they can reclaim that form, well, they're certainly going to be safe. They're 3 points above relegation zone at the moment. I think just staying up, maybe at the 20th place mark. Tottenham have been a bit all over the spot at the moment, and I won't be surprised if they're dragged into that sort of bottom half teams that don't seem to be doing much. I mean, it still would be considered a success, don't get me wrong. This is the highest level AFC Tottenham have ever played at. But I am going to go with a 2-0 win for Hampton and Richmond Borough in this one. Back to winning ways for the Beavers. Bath City versus Ebbsfleet United. Another team in that relegation scrap is Bath City, who are above the relegation zone in goal difference. It's certainly a much better goal difference. They don't score a lot, Bath. They've only scored 28, but conceding 35 only goals so far this season has been decent enough. And they've had a lot of games in hand of the teams in and around them to manage to stay up, which I suppose, would you rather have points on the board or games in hand? I don't know. I think maybe in Bath's position, so they have got enough game points on the board to be above that dotted line. Maybe the games in hand, they'll probably get at least some points in it. But it's a difficult game against Ebbsfleet. Ebbsfleet have now gone up to 4th in the table. They have done some wonders over the last few weeks. And let's face it, they're definitely going to get playoffs at this rate of proceedings. And I think they win here at Twerton Park 3-1. Chesham United versus Eastbourne Borough. Chesham are impeccably good at the moment. 5 games unbeaten. I don't think anyone necessarily saw that. I mean, they're too far off really to get to the playoffs in my mind. But I think it can still come down. It's a relatively successful season for, I think they're in Buckinghamshire side. Eastbourne, well, it's been one of the most horrific seasons Eastbourne have ever had, I suppose. They're currently 23rd in the league, 4 points off safety. It's really a must-win game, this, isn't it, for Eastbourne? I think every point counts at this moment in time, and maybe they can force a 0-0 draw. It remains to see if that's good enough, if they get it, but we'll see. Dorking Wanderers versus Hornchurch. Dorking have now taken the crown off Torquay. Have gone top of the league now, looking to make. Is it an instant return to the National League? They've been in the National League before. Can't remember how many seasons ago it was. Whether it was the last season or the season before. They're playing against third place Hornchurch. Hornchurch have an opportunity here to switch the narrative on its head and leapfrog Torquay and go top of the league. They have done a decent enough job so far, Hornchurch, but maybe this is a step too far. I've gone 3-1 to Dorking Wanderers in this one to make it 6 wins in a row for the Surrey-based side. Enfield Town versus Horsham. Mid-table Horsham haven't won in the last 4, but 3 of them games have been draws. Enfield, well, they've won the least amount of games so far this season, only a pity 5. And I can't remember even when that last time happened, but 6 points off safety. You can never say never until the last day of the season, really, who's going to be relegated. And I think maybe at home they could just seize a win here. I've gone 2-1 to Enfield Town, maybe quite surprisingly for some. Salisbury versus Chippenham Town. Chippenham have finally won back-to-back games. What is going on? Is the resurgence of Chippenham on? It's really hard to say. They've got an important game, is putting it lightly, up against Salisbury, who haven't won in 4. If they can win that, suddenly I think I've been writing them off all season. Well, maybe we need to actually start paying some serious attention to Chippenham. It's a local rivalry as well, but I do suspect Salisbury edge it out 3-2 in this one. It's going to be a close game, though. Wolves versus Arsenal. Don't know why there's a Premier League game this week, but it's a fairly obvious win for Arsenal for me in this one. 1-0 to the Gunners. I mean, Wolves will try and frustrate the team from London, but no results going their way. Karabag versus Newcastle United. Maybe the Azerbaijani team can force a 0-0 draw in this, which they're at home. It's a long way from Newcastle. I think they have to fly up from London with fans. It's going to be difficult. Don't get me wrong. If they get misled a bit by the sort of 6-0, I think it was Liverpool beat them by. Yeah. Wigan Athletic versus Luton Town, a League One game. And Wigan, what has happened? Well, how much of a decade changes football, doesn't it? Wigan looking like they're going to be relegated to League Two when they were 1 point in the Premier League, a really strong team, and they lost 4 in a row. They got rid of Ryan Lowe. They're at an all-time low themselves at the moment. Yeah, I mean, can Gary Caldwell actually do the job? It's an interesting question on everybody's lips. He went from Exeter to the surprise of absolutely no one, but he did an all right job with Exeter, I would suggest. I've gone with, though, a 2-0 win for Luton Town in this one. Grimsby Town versus Walsall. 9th versus 10th. Walsall desperately need to get back into that playoffs at least. It looks like another capitulation for the Black Country side. But Grimsby, they are a difficult team to face at the moment. I think that's fair to say. But you know what? I'm going with a 4-1 win for Walsall. I think they get themselves back into contention for the Saddlers. Farnborough versus Dagenham and Redbridge. Dagenham and Redbridge, a tight side for this. Incredibly fascinating coming to think about it. A team which are now only 6 points off the playoffs and have actually started picking up a bit of form themselves, having been a bit nowhere like the first half of the season. Farnborough in relegation zone on goal difference. meaning they will be scrapping for everything. And I actually think they might win this one. 2-1 to Farnborough. The points may be a bit more important for Farnborough at this moment of proceedings. Fenerbahce versus Nottingham Forest, and Zrinski versus Crystal Palace, I think might be quite similar games, actually. I think both will pan out to be a 0-0 draw. But we shall remain to be seen about whether that will be the case. Blackburn versus Preston North End, a championship game, but more importantly, a local rivalry in this one. The Lancashire derby, the one that a lot of people talk about quite a lot. It's like Blackburn, Burnley, Preston versus Blackpool, maybe ones that we'll traditionally talk about, but this has certainly become a equally important rivalry. Maybe at Ewood Park, Blackburn can do Derby a favour. I mean, we have got half of their team and manager after all. So I'm going with a 2-1 win for Blackburn Rovers in this one. Aston Villa versus Leeds United. We're on to the Saturday games. And I mean, Leeds, they're probably about 10 points or so, maybe 8 points off safety. I think the 40 points in the Premier League maybe needs to be revised a bit lower to 38. But I still think, they've got a healthy 6 point advantage over West Ham United. It's probably job done for Leeds. Obviously, they can't take their eye off the ball yet, and this is a very difficult game against Aston Villa, who are hoping at every point possible to get a Champions League place, and they maybe just be able to squeeze it now, maybe a 4th place or so. Even if they fall into the Europa League, it wouldn't be a bad season. I've gone 2-1 to Villa. They're at Villa Park, so another important win. Brentford versus Brighton and Hove Albion. 7th place Brentford. Well, they are looking the surprise package of this season a bit, aren't they? Maybe getting Conference League football if the cuts line a certain way. They beat Macclesfield, courtesy of an own goal last night. I mean, Brighton may form quite a bit of an easier opposition, assuming they've not won in absolutely ages. And I think Brentford pile on the misery, winning 4-2 in this game. On to Chelsea versus Burnley. Burnley are still fighting. They won their last game. They've suddenly come alive a bit. I mean, maybe a little too late, but I think they've been forcing draws against some of the better teams at the moment. And I think Chelsea will be the latest victim of that. A 2-2 draw is what I'm going to go with in this game. On to West Ham United versus Bournemouth. An important game, probably, for West Ham. They're now 3 points off safety. They have been for a while. That gap has been ever present in terms of relegation scrapping. But with Forest having a difficult game this weekend against Liverpool, which we'll come to shortly, West Ham seem to have a relatively easier one. But you know what? Bournemouth have done a very good job of late in terms of picking up points-wise. Unbeaten in 6. I think West Ham, they've only had one defeat in the last 5, though. Maybe a draw in this one. A 2-2 draw at the London Stadium. Come on, West Ham. Win this game for us. Man City versus Newcastle United. Man City versus Newcastle is going to be a game which has happened 5 times at least this season. Because they've drawn each other in the FA Cup. They played each other twice in the league. They played each other in the FA Cup twice. Maybe they're going to draw each other in the Champions League at some point. I don't know. But it's Saudi versus Abu Dhabi. Well, what is it? UAE. Absolutely ridiculous. The battle of the Middle East oil giants. And I think Man City are much more further ahead in advance, and they're 4 points off the title. Maybe not get it anymore. I mean, they are 4 games unbeaten, and I do think they win this one 3-1. But it isn't looking as... it looks like Arsenal might just be able to bump it out. Hull City versus Queen's Park Rangers. Mid-table QPR are taking on 5th place and playoff hopefuls Hull City, which, you know what, they are. There's a possibility that all the playoff teams end up being the same as they are now. I think Millwall is the one that I have actually got question marks over. But they seem to have been in 3rd place for a reason. Anyway, Hull versus QPR. I think QPR may cause an upset in this one. 2-1 to Queen's Park Rangers. Can't quite explain it. Stoke City versus Leicester. We need Leicester fans, we don't need, but Leicester fans will be hoping for a reaction. The ghost of FFP or FSR or whatever you want to call it looms large over Leicester. They are now in relegation zone by a point due to that points deduction. Haven't looked great a lot recently. Lost to Southampton in both games that they played them this week, once in extra time. They need a reaction. Stoke aren't. They're not sort of pulling up any trees at the moment. I'm going to be fair on that. And I think maybe Leicester could get a comfortable 5-0 win in this one, which seems ridiculous to say, but they do have the forward prowess to be able to do it. It's just they got the 2nd worst defence in the league is what their main problems are. So maybe just go all guns blazing. Swansea City versus Bristol City. Bit of a local rivalry of sorts, I suppose. 16th place Swansea, although they have started picking up points recently, although did lose against Derby. And maybe, therefore, we'll have a bit of a reaction, hopefully, up against Bristol City. I'm saying hopefully because it means that Derby get that step closer if Bristol drop points. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw in this one. West Bromwich Albion versus Coventry City. Coventry, top of the league. We did a live watch along yesterday of them last night, but oddly, they seem to be at the moment unable to win away, but win at home. And maybe they're at such a high at the moment up against beating their rivals at Middlesbrough that they throw it all away and lose up against a West Brom, because that is like typical Championship. I've gone 2-0 at Hawthorns to West Bromwich Albion in this local rivalry. I think it's just one of them absolutely mental ones that just smacks of a sort of a Championship all over. If you're a Championship club who's in the Championship, and you know exactly what I'm talking about if you're a fan of one of them teams. Middlesbrough versus Oxford United. I think Middlesbrough need a reaction from that defeat. Having been so good beforehand, I think they are going to get it. I mean, I'm sorry, Oxford, but you are going to be relegated this season. That is just simply going to be the case. 2-1 to Middlesbrough for perfect reaction. Millwall versus Portsmouth. 21st place Portsmouth got a difficult job against 3rd place Millwall, and I do think Millwall add another win to the tally. 2-1 in the Lions' Den to Millwall. I mean, we know how ferocious it is to go there. Norwich City versus Birmingham City. I think Norwich are safe. They've picked up a fair point and few amount of points now. 5 wins in the last 6. Up against Birmingham, who are unbeaten in quite a long time now. Do watch out, because they could possibly sneak into the playoffs. It could go pretty much any team at the moment, down to Stoke maybe in 14th. I think maybe at Carrow Road, Norwich force a 2-0 win, continuing their great form of late, it must be said. Massively turned around. Southampton versus Charlton Athletic. Southampton in 10th, 5 games unbeaten. There's a whole bunch of teams who could potentially sneak into the playoffs in that final spot and do a daring late run. And Southampton's one of them. And I think maybe, just maybe, Charlton Athletic can be... Actually, no. Southampton can get a result. Charlton Athletic to lose 2-0 away at St Mary's. Watford versus Derby County. Now, Derby have been better away. We're actually only 1 defeat now in the last 6 games. Won't stop the moaning fans, but if we get a win away, we suddenly look a lot better and closer to being a playoff quality side. However, because we won at home, we probably would end up doing a reverse, and Watford, with their ever-changing carousel of managers, will somehow get a win, even though they've not won in ages. I've just gone with a 2-1 win at Watford. It's just so annoying, and if we were up against the Xavi Garcia team, we probably would have been able to beat them. But because they've changed who's in the managerial hot seat, so again, another whole sort of back to the drawing board situation. Wrexham versus Ipswich Town. Wrexham, I think, might be able to edge out a 1-0 win. They were up against each other in the FA Cup last weekend as well. It was absolutely ridiculous how much they're playing each other. I think, 1-0 to Wrexham in this one makes things a bit difficult. I hope. I don't even care if Derby ever playoffs. I just don't want Wrexham in the playoffs. That's what my one hope is. I'm sure everyone else in the EFL is hoping for exactly the same thing. Plymouth Argyle versus Cardiff City. The first of many League One games this weekend is a bit of a biggie. Cardiff, top of the league. They are probably expected to beat Plymouth, but you know what? I think Plymouth are a side at Home Park. We know Home Park has been always a difficult place to go, and I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw. Probably feels more like a victory for the Pilgrims in that regard, holding top of the table Cardiff to a draw. In the South Yorkshire derby, we've got Rotherham United versus Doncaster Rovers. And I think Rotherham, maybe at home at New York Stadium, win this one. Doncaster will be exhausted from playing Huddersfield, another local rival, earlier on in the week. And I think Rotherham maybe sneak a 2-0 win to the Millers then. Wycombe Wanderers versus Stevenage. Another bit of a local rivalry in this one. 11th versus 9th. 2 points is all that separates these two teams now. Wouldn't be surprised if Wycombe jump over Stevenage come the end of the season. I've gone with a 1-0 win for Wycombe Wanderers. AFC Wimbledon versus Bradford City. I think, you know what? Wimbledon aren't actually that bad at the moment. They're currently 3 games unbeaten. Maybe, Bradford are sort of being a bit hit and miss at the moment. 1-0 to AFC Wimbledon is what I've gone with. Bolton Wanderers versus Blackpool. Bolton Wanderers in 3rd. They are a very good, well-jointed team, Bolton, and I won't want to be any team up against them, and I think Blackpool will be the latest team to taste defeat at the holdings of Bolton at the Tough Sheet Stadium. 2-1 to Bolton Wanderers. Huddersfield Town versus Barnsley, another local rivalry for Huddersfield to deal with as well. I think this time Huddersfield maybe snatch the victory in this one. Barnsley are such a 50-50 team. I mean, at one point this would have been Conor Hourihane versus Lee Grant's team. 2 former Derby players within the last sort of decade, or just over a decade, really. 2-0 to Huddersfield Town. Luton Town versus Burton. I suspect Burton fall to a defeat here. They've not won in the last 5, and you know what? Luton will be hoping to get into that playoff spot, so need to start picking up wins and quick. I'm going 2-0 at Kenilworth Road to Luton Town. Mansfield Town versus Lincoln City. Well, Lincoln, we've gone really through all the superlatives that have been described for them this season, and I just think it's going to be another great result as they win 3-0 away from home up against Mansfield Town. It's going to be a fantastic result for Lincoln. And that probably would be a good week for Lincoln, because I think that, from what I've got written down, they're going to be taking top of the league. Northampton Town versus Leyton Orient. 17th versus 18th. Bit of an important game to make sure that both teams pick up points here in order to avoid relegation. And maybe at home at Sixfields, Northampton edge out a 1-0 win. Very close run affair, I must suggest. Peterborough United versus Exeter City. A mid-table clash, 10th versus 14th. And as a result, I may have to go with a 1-1 draw, especially since Exeter's had 3 draws in the last 4 games. So yeah, a 1-1 draw in this one. Port Vale versus Reading. Reading are just sort of not quite good enough to be in the playoffs at the moment. And this is the reason why I think. I think Port Vale managed to get a 1-0 win in this one at home up against Reading. I just can't tell you why. They're just playing with it with a liberation freedom of no, they're probably going to be destined to relegation now. Stockport County versus Wigan Athletic, another local rivalry. There's a lot going on, aren't there? And I think maybe a draw in this one. For maybe the first time ever, Stockport are the favourites to get the win in this one. But yeah, I've gone with a 1-1 draw. Fleetwood Town versus Barrow in a Loonsdale or Loons on mouthful. I can't remember. Something Loon derby. And it's a interesting one. Mid-table Fleetwood taking on relegation-threatened Barrow. Both will be desperate not to lose it, and therefore probably a 0-0 draw. Swindon Town versus Crewe, two very decent teams at the moment, and therefore I've gone with another draw. You know me, a 0-0 draw in this one. We love to predict 0-0 draws on this channel, it feels. Accrington Stanley versus Shrewsbury Town. I've got another win for who even is manager of Accrington Stanley nowadays. It was John Coleman for so long that it sort of just reverted to type. John Doolan. And I think John Doolan's side can win 1-0 up against Shrewsbury Town in this one. I hope I'm right with Shrewsbury being relegated, because otherwise I do look like a bit of a mug for my predictions video. But even so, at the moment, they have been having a fair share of challenges. Bristol Rovers versus Grimsby Town. Bristol Rovers maybe be able to scrap out a point here. I've gone with a 1-1 draw. Grimsby will probably be more disappointed out of that, and it may well end up as a win in Grimsby's favour. It's at the Memorial Ground, I think it's called, and that may inspire Bristol Rovers to get something. Cheltenham Town versus Salford City. 18th place Cheltenham, I reckon, might cause an upset and win against Salford 2-1. Decent day's work for Robbins could do that. Whether it remains as a result remains to be seen. Colchester United versus Barnet. Well, we talked a bit earlier about how Barnet are on a absolute storming run of form at the moment, and I think another win for the Bees. 1-0 to Barnet away from home in this one. Keep your eye on them. That's all I'm going to say. Crawley Town versus Chesterfield. Maybe Chesterfield get a win in this one. As I said, an erratic team to predict, but Crawley just for a relegation zone. I think Chesterfield win this one by 2-0. Gillingham versus Oldham Athletic. 14th versus 16th. Mid-table. Nothing really riding on this. Going to be a dull, dire 0-0 draw at Priestfield. It's just not going to be an entertaining game. Harrogate Town versus Bromley. Sorry, Harrogate. I don't think you're going to be winning against Bromley, who are top of the league. I remember when this was a National League affair, how things do change. I don't think either of these were particularly expected to be promoted either when they were. 2-0 to Bromley, though, in this one. Newport County versus Cambridge United. Another team playing a team in the currently automatic promotion zone, playing against a team in a relegation zone. And again, I'm going to have to, go with a win for the team in the playoff hunt. A 1 or automatic promotion hunt. Cambridge United to win 1-0 in this one at Rodney Parade. The Exiles, probably a bit disappointed in that. Notts County versus Tranmere Rovers. I'm going to go with another win for Notts County. They are picking up wins left, right and centre at the moment. And I think a 2-1 win for the Magpies up against Tranmere Rovers. Aldershot Town versus Scunthorpe United. As I mentioned earlier, Aldershot are actually on a really good run of form and maybe can get another win here. I've gone with a 2-1 win at home, which will probably rock a few boats around in that one in terms of Scunthorpe would then be on quite the bad run of form and questions would start emerging over them. They were a bit cocky early on in the season, I will say that. Altrincham versus Braintree. 18th versus 20th, a very important game. 4 points separating them, but both of these two teams, you can never be too wary about the gap between yourself and relegation. And I think Altrincham, maybe at Moston Road, could win it at home 3-1 in this one. Boreham Wood versus Forest Green Rovers. Boreham Wood in 4th against Forest Green Rovers in 6th. Both have dropped far too many games so far recently, both losing. It's too many games, really. 4 games within the last 6 games, rather. And probably another one's going to lose here. But Boreham Wood seem to have slightly turned it around of late. So maybe 1-0 for Boreham Wood at home. Disappointing for Robbie Savage's men, maybe. Boston United versus Tamworth. Tamworth in 13th, Boston in 11th. 4 wins in a row as well for Boston. 5 games unbeaten. Very, very good. 4 draws in the last 5 for Tamworth. Maybe a draw in this one as well. I've gone with a 1-1 draw at York Road. Is that what it's still called? I can't remember. I know we went to a new stadium recently. Brackley Town versus Southend United. I think this is a bit of an opportunity for Southend to get back into the playoffs. Problem is Brackley are unbeaten in a long time, but a lot of them are draws, which I think does sort of suggest something, doesn't it? Although Brackley are one of the lowest scorers in the league. I think they're second lowest scorers, potentially behind Braintree Town. So it's not great for Brackley in terms of that regard. I've gone with a 2-0 win for Southend United in this one. Carlisle United versus Yeovil Town. Carlisle dropped a few points. They seem to be content now that they're probably going to be in the playoffs. And I think Mark Hughes' team is going to lose here. It's a long way to go for Yeovil anyway. But maybe nicking a 1-0 win. Morecambe versus Eastleigh. Another team doing badly at the moment, I suppose, is Morecambe. They're in relegation zone. They've switched managers, but probably a little too late. 7 points is a gap between them and safety now. Very hard for the Lancashire team, and I think Eastleigh are just hitting a bit of form at the right time. 3 games unbeaten. Eastleigh to win this one at 2-1. Rochdale versus Woking, another win, fairly obviously for Rochdale here. I'm sorry, Woking, but I think you're going to lose. I think you're going to lose 3-0. Solihull Moors versus Hartlepool United. Interesting one, 9th v 10th. Probably both of these 2 teams have blown their opportunity for playoffs. So I think this will just be an entertaining 4-3 win for the Monkey Hangers. Sutton United versus Wealdstone, another local rivalry for Sutton this week, as they're up against Wealdstone, and maybe a combative 2-2 draw at Gander Green Lane, or Green Gander Lane, I can't remember which order it is, but I think that would be quite an interesting result. In a Yorkshire derby, we've got York City versus FC Halifax Town. Top of league York, I think they could drop a couple of points in this one, which won't be great for the Minstermen, as I think they're going to be held to a 2-2 draw at the LNER Community Stadium. I just think Halifax can maybe just disturb the apple cart, or whatever that phrase is. Truro City versus Gateshead, a relegation 6-pointer. Can't really even cover this anymore because both teams are probably going to be relegated this season. And yes, I therefore think it's going to be a 2-2 draw in what is the longest journey that I think Gateshead fans will ever have to make down to Cornwall. Alfreton versus Merthyr Town. A difficult game for Alfreton, who are involved in a bit of a relegation scrap, let's be honest. And yeah, I think Merthyr run out very triumphant 6-2 winners away from home. It's not ideal for Alfreton, that. But I just think it is just very statistically likely when you're playing up against third place, who, even though they've dropped a few points lately, are no mean team to come up against. Bedford Town versus Chorley. I think Chorley edge out with a 1-0 win in this one. Bedford haven't won in the last 5. Now only 2 points per relegation zone. They may only just stay up now. I was at one point fairly confident of them staying up. Not so much anymore. They seem to be slipping a bit. I mean, they're firmly in the south. So Trinity time probably is a problem. I think Buxton at home could maybe force a draw up against Fylde. I've gone with a 2-2 draw in this one, which will help South Shields no end, and Fylde dropping points hasn't been a regular occurrence this season, but you never know. Maybe Buxton could cause another bit of ruckus. Curzon Ashton versus Worksop Town. Absolutely fascinating that these two teams you think would have played each other much more across their history. They really haven't, actually. And this is actually the first time that Worksop is going to be travelling. Oh, sorry. Is it Curzon Ashton? Which team? Curzon Ashton, I think so. So, first time Worksop is travelling to Curzon Ashton since an FA Trophy day out back in the 1980s, I believe. But yes, I think it's going to be a combative Curzon Ashton 4-3 win in this one. I think it's maybe a step too far for Worksop in this game. I know they've picked up a few decent results of late. Curzon Ashton were a team which looked maybe like they might sneak into the playoffs. Hereford versus Scarborough Athletic. Having had the midweek to adjust to their new home ground, maybe Hereford and their new manager, I suppose, maybe Hereford could cause a bit of an upset and win 1-0 up against Scarborough Athletic, who are just about in the playoffs at the moment by 2 points. That changes week by week, by the way, whether they are or not. 1-0 win for the Bulls would be an interesting result. Kidderminster Harriers versus Southport. I've gone with a fairly routine 2-0 win for Kidderminster Harriers at the Agborough Stadium. I mean, they're a playoff form team. They're probably going to beat relegation-threatened Southport. Leamington versus Chester. Dominant display, really, for the Cestrians. I think Chester run out 4-1 winners away from home. Leamington were relegated for a reason, in my view. Macclesfield versus Kingsland Town. I think Macclesfield maybe expanded a bit of all of their energy in that FA Cup game up against Brentford. And, probably quite fatigued as a result of it. And maybe Kingsland can pounce upon that with a 4-0 win to the Linnets. That would be a surprise, wouldn't it? Oxford City versus Marine. Relegation threatened Oxford City. Could they? Potentially. I don't know. There is definitely a realm where they just edge out a win here. I think so. They need it to stay up, and I think they might stay up this season. 1-0 to Oxford City. Marine, they're an odd team. They're sort of knocking on the door of the playoffs, but just aren't consistent enough to be able to do it. Radcliffe versus Peterborough Sports. I think Peterborough Sports run out 3-1 winners, which may be a bit surprising. Radcliffe are in the playoffs, but they have been dropping a lot of wins, dropping loads of points recently, losing 3 out of the last 6. And Peterborough Sports maybe spy an opportunity. South Shields versus Telford. Both of these two teams in very fine form, and therefore I think it's going to be a combative 1-1 draw. I wouldn't be wanting to play Telford right now if I'm South Shields because they are in such good form, but you have to play who you're up against. A County Durham rivalry of Spennymoor Town versus Darlington. And Darlington in 9th, 5 games unbeaten, but I think maybe Spennymoor at home can claim local bragging rights. 2-1 to Spennymoor Town in this one. International League South we go with SE Totton versus Hornchurch. Hornchurch have dropped too many points for me of late, and this is just going to be a typical example of that, as they're held by the ever-chaotic ASC Totton 1-1. A relegation 6-pointer, Bath City versus Hampton Richmond Borough, 19th versus 20th. I think Bath maybe sees the initiative in this one at home at Twerton Park, 1-0 to the Romans. Chelmsford City versus Salisbury. Chelmsford on a decent little run of form. They're one of the many teams which make up the 46 pointers in this current National League South. We've had 4 teams on 46 points, then a further 2 on 45. That mid-table plaque is all just constant, just outside the playoffs, is all just moving around furniture at the moment. But I suspect a 2-1 win for the Clarets up against Salisbury in this one. Chesham United versus Ebbsfleet United. Both of these two teams on very good form. And therefore, I'm going to go with a draw in this. I've gone with a 2-2 draw. Dover Athletic versus Western-super-Mare. Western-super-Mare are in the playoffs for a reason, but they have started dropping a fair few amounts of points recently. Maybe need to get back to winning ways, and I think they will do so with a 1-0 win up against Dover Athletic at the Crabble. Eastbourne Borough versus Torquay United. Well, Eastbourne, this is a bit of a free hit. They're sort of expected to lose against Torquay, and I think maybe as a result force a 1-1 draw because they can just play off to their heart's content in this one. Farnborough versus Enfield Town. Farnborough in 21st, Enfield in 24th. I think Enfield are probably concerned that they're probably going to be relegated this season. Farnborough, therefore, will be piling on the pressure and making sure to get a win in this one. 4-1 to Farnborough, the Hampshire team. Horsham versus Hemel Hempstead Town. An interesting one, to say the least. 7th place, Hemel Hempstead. Horsham have dropped too many points and dropped down to 12th as a result. They were at one point looking like they could sneak into the playoffs. I've gone with a 0-0 draw. On to another York Road. Maidenhead United versus Dagenham and Redbridge. 8th versus 9th. A proper promotion 6-pointer, which will inevitably disappoint, I'm afraid to say. A 1-1 draw. I know all of you were hoping for me to come off the fence for that, but no, absolutely not. Maidstone United versus Dorking Wanderers. First place, Maidstone. Got a difficult game up against Maidstone, who, yes, okay, they've not won in the last 5, but they're at one point looking like they might mount a playoff charge. A 1-1 draw in this one is what I've gone with. Tonbridge Angels versus Chippenham Town. Chippenham have sort of got the wind blowing behind them now, and they seem to have their backs up and looking like, it might pull off the impossible. And I think, therefore, they're going to manage to, if they get a win against Tonbridge Angels, they've got Salisbury and Tonbridge Angels, 2 very winnable games for Chippenham. If they win both of them, then they look like they may end up safety. But I think in this one, it's going to be a 1-1 draw. Worthing versus Slough. Worthing are in the top 6, but they are in desperately bad form compared to Slough, who are actually very much in good form. 4 wins in the last 6, only 1 defeat in the last 6 as well. 4-3 win, though, I am going to go with Worthing. Just their quality alone so far this season has shown that they can win games. Crystal Palace versus Wolverhampton Wanderers. Well, surely Wolves lose this one. Palace need to, Glasner basically needs to make sure that he is at least considered as, I think he had his eyes maybe on the Spurs job, and that seems to have gone by as they seem to be trying to get Poch after the World Cup. And I think he needs to focus on Palace at the moment, and I think he's going to win this one 4-2. Wolves only on 9 points so far, still below Derby's current record. Nottingham Forest versus Liverpool. Liverpool, if you could helpfully do us a hand and absolutely smash Forest, that'd be hugely appreciated. I don't think that'll happen because Forest are actually on a roughly similar, well, actually I think they're on a better run of form than Liverpool. So I've gone with a 1-1 draw at the City Ground. Sunderland versus Fulham, a mid-table clash, 11th versus 12th. Both have been hit and miss in various performances this season. So 3-2 win for Fulham, could go the other way though. North London derby it is, Tottenham Hotspur versus Arsenal. I don't think it's as much of a bigger game as maybe traditionally because Spurs are, let's not make this up, in a relegation battle. 5 points off the relegation zone. That's in a relegation battle. Arsenal will be wanting to win the Premier League. Arsenal to win 1-0. The Steel City derby, and it's a bit of an unfortunate one for Sheffield Wednesday. Maybe put on a proud display and a proud face, but it's going to be another defeat for, they've only won once all year, Sheffield Wednesday. I need to stop predicting them for win. I'm going for Sheffield United to beat their rivals 1-0. Everton versus Manchester United. It's going to be an interesting one. Man United have gone on a really good run of form. Everton, although they lost the last one, but also on a decent run of form. And maybe David Moyes' guys can sneak into Europe. You never know. They seem to be quite back now. 2-2 draw in this one. Walsall versus MK Dons. Tough game for both teams. But I think Walsall will probably get back into the playoffs and they're going to win at the Bescot 4-2. Now, weird novelty is Chelmsford City playing Hempstead Town. It's not weird for Chelmsford fans, but they play midweek games on Mondays. And the reason for that, I did a little bit of research, was because they play on an athletic stadium, which is normally booked out on a Tuesday, and it was a tradition which stemmed back from about over 50 years. Anyway, whether it's good or bad, I think it probably averages out as good for them in this. Maybe tired legs. 0-0 draw in this one is what I've gone with. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe if you're new around here. That'll be hugely appreciated. And I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye for now.